Today, we are diving into workplace surveillance. And let me tell you, it's a world that has changed more in the last decade than it has in probably the entire century before it.
And let's start right here with this quote from Melissa Ojeda, a former Amazon worker. Her story isn't just about hard work. It's about working at a pace that's not just set by a manager, but by a whole system. It really sets the stakes for what we're about to get into.
So the real question isn't who was watching her, but what. And that simple change from who to what is the huge shift we're unpacking today. The answer takes us into a whole new era of management and control. Okay, so let's get into this new watchful eye. We're going to see how the jump from the old way of monitoring to the new way isn't just some small upgrade, it's a total transformation of what can even be seen and measured on the job. You can really see the difference here. I mean, we've gone from monitoring actions, watching security camera, counting how many things someone makes, to analyzing massive amounts of data. These new tools aren't just recording what you do, they're looking at your social media, they're tracking biometric data, and they're even trying to predict what you'll do next. It's a huge leap from just observation to analysis. And the engine driving all of this is something researchers call datafication. It's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. Almost any part of our work life can be turned into a number, a data point. The speed of your typing, your heart rate, even the tone of your emails. Suddenly, it's all something that can be measured, tracked, and, managed. And because of this datafication, employers can now target things that used to be totally private. A big report from the European Commission's Joint Research Center laid this out. The scope of this new surveillance is incredibly personal. We're not just talking about how well you do your job anymore. We're talking about your physical state, your emotions. It creates a much, much more detailed picture of you as a person. Now, with all this wild new tech, you'd think there would be a whole new set of rules to keep it in check, right? Well, as we're about to see, the legal side of things is really struggling to keep up, and it's often falling back on rules that were made for a totally different time. So in Europe, under GDPR, you would think that getting your consent would be the most important thing, but regulators have pointed out a huge flaw in that thinking. Can you really freely give your consent to your boss? The person who holds your career in their hands? Because of that power difference, employers often use a different legal reason, legitimate interest. And this really gets to the heart of the legal issue. I mean, as the EU's own data protection groups have said, the whole relationship between a boss and an employee is unequal by its very nature. That power imbalance makes it pretty much impossible for any consent to be truly voluntary. And that's why legitimate interest becomes the go-to justification. Okay, so let's bring all these abstract ideas down to earth into a very real place. We're going inside the monitored warehouse. We'll use Amazon as a case study to see exactly how these systems work on the ground. Just let that sink in for a second. This quote from an Oxfam report is, well, it's pretty shocking. It points to a level of pressure that's so high it gets in the way of the most basic human needs. This is not just about working hard, it's about working at a relentless pace that is set and enforced by technology. And the numbers really drive this home. 3/4 of these workers feel constant pressure to go faster and faster. And this kind of pressure cooker environment isn't an accident. It's the direct result of a system that is highly optimized and very, very closely monitored. The really important thing to get here is that this pressure is managed by technology. And how do we know this? Because the blueprints are public. Amazon actually holds patents for systems that are designed from the ground up to track a worker's every move with incredible precision. So let's look at one of these patents. This is for an ultrasonic tracking bracelet. A worker wears it on their wrist, and it sends out these little ultrasonic pulses. Receivers around the warehouse pick up those signals and can pinpoint the exact position of a worker's hands as they move from, say, one bin to the next. And get this, it's a two-way street. The bracelet doesn't just send out data, it can receive commands. The patent talks about giving the worker haptic feedback, basically a vibration. So you reach into the right bin, maybe you get a little buzz. You reach into the wrong one, you get a different buzz. It's a system that is literally guiding and correcting your physical movements in real time. It's almost turning the worker's hand into a component that's being controlled by the system. So what is the effect of all this? What is the human cost of being tracked, measured, and turned into a stream of data that needs to be optimized? Well, this isn't just guesswork. Researchers have actually mapped out the psychological and social effects of this kind of monitoring. You can see in this model, there's a really clear cause and effects chain. It flows from choices the company makes on the left, through the monitoring practices themselves, and leads directly to employees' stress, and eventually to really negative things like burnout over on the right. That JRC report we mentioned earlier pulls together decades of research into this really clear list of risks. Constant monitoring is directly linked to things like higher stress, less trust in your managers, feeling like you've lost control, and, of course, burnout. These are measurable, well-documented consequences. So this all brings us to the future of this technology, because it's not standing still, it's evolving from a tool that just helps a human manager to becoming the manager itself. This next step leads to a concept that experts call algorithmic regulation. Think of it as a complete loop. The system watches you, and based on your data, it automatically gives you rewards or penalties to nudge your behavior in the direction it wants. And if you're thinking this sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, it's not. This diagram here shows how it's already the normal way of doing things in the gig economy. Platforms like Uber or DoorDash don't have an army of managers out in the field. They have an algorithm that monitors, assigns tasks, rates, and pays millions of workers all over the world. You know, researchers even have a name for these kinds of systems: social machines. In these systems, people are basically essential parts, like cogs in the machine, working together with the tech. But the key thing is that the human cogs might not be fully aware of or have any control over what the machine's bigger goal is. They just do their specific task, guided by the system. And that's really the endgame of this whole trend. When the system isn't just feeding data to a manager, but it's making the management decisions itself, assigning tasks, setting the pace, giving feedback, even deciding pay. That line between just watching someone and actively controlling them it disappears. Which leaves us with one final, pretty big question. Sure, these systems are designed by people, but they operate on their own. They learn and adapt based on the data they collect. So when the algorithm is the boss, who is actually calling the shots? The programmer? The data? Or is it the system itself?